Nature does not negotiate. It patiently digests. Hidden beneath unbroken canopies and choked by shifting soils lie the remnants of massive human ambitions that the earth has quietly erased. These are not the celebrated ruins found in tourist brochures, but forbidden dead zones where sprawling utopias and concrete megacities were simply surrendered to the rot. From carbonized colonial capitals to isolated settlements completely wiped from public cartography, these documented cases reveal how quickly our engineered permanence fractures. Yet nothing captures this unsettling surrender quite like the silhouette of a rusted Midwestern water tower piercing the deep Amazonian sky, the final decaying monument of an industrialist's doomed empire, now holding only stagnant rain and creeping vines. We are stepping off the map to walk through the silent graveyards humanity tried to forget. Prepare to descend into the shadows. Number 8. The Acre Geoglyphs. For centuries, the dense Amazonian canopy swallowed any trace of human geometry. It took modern deforestation and airborne LiDAR scans to strip away the vines and reveal what the soil was reclaiming. Hundreds of massive, perfectly carved geometric trenches emerged from the green expanse, etched deep into the earth. These earthen squares and circles span up to 300 meters across, their original depth now softened by centuries of accumulated leaf litter. 2 millennia ago, this unbroken green expanse functioned as an engineered grid. An interconnected civilization of up to 1 million people carved out plazas, palisades, and straight dirt avenues. They moved thousands of tons of earth. Human hands maintained wide, sunlit clearings where the canopy now dictates the light. The geometry of their daily routine remains stamped into the subsoil, gripped by dense root systems and consumed by the advancing forest floor. The avenues simply went quiet. Long before European contact, these massive geometric settlements emptied. According to archaeological soil records, a complex knot of shifting rainfall patterns and localized disease likely triggered the slow exodus. The jungle did not violently overthrow this civilization. It patiently reclaimed it. Vines dissolved the wooden palisades, and the canopy closed over the open grids. Today, the deep trenches hold nothing but accumulated leaf litter and the expanding root systems of Brazil nut trees. Perfectly straight, mathematically precise angles are the one thing that should not exist beneath a consuming jungle canopy. Massive squares and octagons, cut deep into the earth, align precisely with celestial movements, tracking solstices with an engineer's exactitude. Yet the forest has swallowed every physical trace of the minds that calculated these trajectories. No carved stones or written language survive the damp decay. The soil holds flawless astronomical alignments, but the builders' identities remain entirely unrecorded. Number 7. The Guyana City Ruins. Gigantic steel skeletons and corroded crane booms jut abruptly from the dense South American canopy. The oxidized metal flakes away in the humid air, creating a constant risk of structural failure. Heavy girders, originally engineered to anchor a utopian metropolis, now bear a toxic load of pooling rainwater and aggressive vine growth. Beneath these suspended tons of rotting iron, the soil around the drop zones runs slick with heavy metal runoff. Shadows stretch quietly across the corroded, failing blast furnaces. Blueprints originally designed this grid to operate as one of the largest steel-producing megacities on the continent. The capital supply simply evaporated. According to local financial records, a severe economic crisis severed the project's lifelines mid-construction, halting the expansion instantly. Now, multi-ton cranes sit oxidized and locked in structural failure above the jungle canopy, threatening a blind collapse. Heavy earth movers, their hydraulic systems corroded and leaking a toxic load into the mud, rest exactly where the operators park them. The keys remain rusted inside the control panels. Massive steel treads, choked by thick vines, disappear entirely into the wet soil. The jungle does not merely cover these silent, colossal machines. It actively digests them, breaking down high-tensile alloys into corroded skeletal remains. They rest in the shadows like dead mechanical beasts being eaten alive by the undergrowth. Navigating this graveyard means walking blind through oxidized iron teeth and fractured hydraulic arms. A single slip against the jagged metal exposes tissue to severe bacterial loads. Number 6. Ciudad Perdida rests in quiet vertical isolation. Reaching these stone circles carved into the steep Colombian peaks demands a grueling, multi-day trek, miles beyond the end of any physical road. 650 years before the foundation of Machu Picchu, a sprawling indigenous empire engineered a capital directly into these inaccessible ridges. Thousands of inhabitants navigated a vast network of terraced plazas and stone staircases that plummeted toward the river gorge below. Yet even at the height of its bustling power, the surrounding canopy was already dropping heavy roots along the outer retaining walls. The retreat was methodical, not chaotic. As Spanish forces advanced along the coast, the inhabitants deliberately emptied these sheer, high-altitude stone plazas. According to regional archaeological surveys, this evacuation was a calculated measure to keep the inaccessible gorge settlements hidden from conquest. They severed the access trails and left no wealth behind. Within a few decades, encroaching vines and wet root systems sealed the empty terraces beneath a continuous green canopy. Thick moss conceals a sheer face of engineered stone, invisible until a boot slips on the edge. Here's a part that gets me. The dense canopy kept this plummeting gorge completely inaccessible until the 1970s, patiently swallowing every trace of human architecture. It was not scholars who broke the silence, but black market grave robbers navigating a wet, root-choked descent. They brushed away centuries of dead soil to uncover 1,200 carved steps plunging directly into the abyss. Number 5. Saint-Pierre. The heat-warped columns of what was once a grand cathedral now support only a canopy of thick vines. Charred stone blocks, imported to build a thriving colonial capital, sit cracked under the quiet weight of encroaching roots. Where thousands walked along paved avenues, broad-leafed ferns pushed through the carbonized rubble. The heavy iron bells of the church remain half-melted in the damp tropical soil. Before the ash-choked rubble defined this coastline, the harbor sheltered the most cosmopolitan city in the West Indies. Electric trams hummed along stone-paved streets, weaving between wealthy merchant estates and brightly lit cafes. It was a center of vibrant human warmth, built to mirror the permanence of a European capital. The municipal blueprint featured an 800-seat grand theater, extensive botanical gardens, and a dedicated telegraph relay station. At 7:52 a.m. on May 8, 1902, the city's telegraph line suddenly went dead. Mount Pelée had unleashed a pyroclastic flow, sending a superheated avalanche of gas and ash-choked debris down its slopes. According to contemporary geological surveys, the descending mass exceeded 1,000 degrees Celsius, initiating a carbonizing erasure of 30,000 lives. It was an execution of extreme heat and suffocating pressure. The colonial capital became a heat-warped graveyard in exactly 3 minutes. Beneath 30,000 carbonized victims, one set of lungs still drew breath inside the ember-scarred rubble. The city's only survivor was a prisoner locked in a poorly ventilated underground dungeon. Thick stone walls, built to punish him with absolute isolation, instead deflected the thermal shockwave. While the free citizens above were reduced to ash, the condemned man simply waited in the dark. His solitary confinement cell featured a single, narrow grate facing away from the mountain. Number 4. Gorgona Island. The decaying concrete cell blocks are saturated with a localized biological threat. The dense jungle canopy swallows the maximum security perimeter, leaching moisture into the dark corridors. Beneath the rotting bunks and vine-choked walls, the region's most venomous pit vipers coil in the damp shadows. The former solitary confinement wing now operates as a humid incubator, with dozens of heavy-bodied snakes resting directly against the oxidized iron bars. A metallic scent lingers in the stagnant humidity. Colombia isolated its most dangerous criminals here, relying on the lethal terrain to enforce an impenetrable perimeter. According to human rights reports from 1984, unchecked disease and systemic abuse forced the facility's closure. Today, toxic runoff leaches from the abandoned guard towers into the saturated soil. The jungle canopy actively consumes the perimeter, accelerating the structural failure of the concrete watchposts. Anyone standing beneath these observation platforms faces tons of oxidized steel, suspended largely by creeping roots and decaying iron bolts. Venomous scales blend into the corroded iron. The air smells of saturated soil and metallic decay, masking an immediate physical risk. Pit vipers rest along the oxidized window frames, camouflaged against the rotting metal. Fleeing the facility required bypassing 2 distinct biological barriers. Inmates who reached the water faced shark-heavy ocean currents, while those hiding inside the compound risked fatal snake strikes. Today, the cell doors hang wide open, but coiled vipers physically block the narrow concrete choke points. Number 3 is Jonestown, a featureless green void. The physical footprint was entirely consumed by the jungle after its coordinates were officially scrubbed. Today, the tract is an officially ceased zone of secondary growth, but it was originally built as a sprawling, self-sustaining agricultural metropolis. The People's Temple Agricultural Project was engineered as a total escape from modern administrative reach. Followers labored to carve dormitories, a working medical clinic, and a central pavilion directly out of the dense canopy. Operating outside standard jurisdictions, the settlement enforced its boundaries using strict internal passports and heavily guarded perimeter wire. The administrative endpoint arrived on November 18, 1978. According to subsequent congressional investigations, the central pavilion became the staging ground for a terminal protocol. Over 900 citizens were effectively deleted from the registry in a single afternoon, driven by a fatal intersection of isolated authority and chemical coercion. The event was officially logged as the largest mass murder-suicide in modern history. When Guyanese troops secured the coordinates, they found the population arranged in concentric circles around the emptied steel vats. Where a sprawling agricultural grid once commanded the clearing, only the oxidized chassis of heavy tractors remain, sinking into the soil. In the immediate aftermath, administrative bodies quietly scrubbed the settlement's coordinates from regional surveys. The jungle canopy was left to consume the machinery. Without official designations or maintained access, the site officially ceased to exist on paper. The rusted engine blocks now stand as the sole physical markers in a sector entirely deleted from public cartography. Number 2. Belterra. Identical American suburban homes stand perfectly aligned along overgrown sidewalks. Wooden clapboard siding and pitched roofs mimic a 1920s Midwestern neighborhood preserved deep within the Amazon basin. The relentless humidity settles heavily over the manicured grid, softening the timber and peeling the white paint in long, damp strips. Inside these identical living rooms, the spatial geometry remains exactly as left. Red equatorial mud now covers the concrete front porches, pooling against intact wooden doors. This was not Henry Ford's first attempt. After his initial settlement collapsed under agricultural blight and labor friction, the automaker pushed deeper into the Amazon to secure a private rubber supply. He imposed a rigid industrial grid over the soil, demanding perfectly straight planting rows and strictly scheduled Midwestern routines. The layout remains entirely intact, an alien geometry superimposed on the rainforest floor. The assembly line logic still dictates the exact spacing of the empty street lamps. The processing plant stopped overnight. The multi-million-dollar investment was not ultimately dismantled by the jungle, but by a distant chemical pivot. According to corporate ledgers from 1945, the sudden commercial viability of synthetic rubber rendered the Amazonian extraction network economically obsolete. Inside the quiet factories, massive steel curing vats and drying racks sit completely intact, exactly as left. The last daily quotas remain penciled on the foreman's chalkboard. A bright red American fire hydrant sits perfectly intact, half swallowed by the creeping roots of a strangler fig. Beyond it, sections of white picket fencing remain exactly as left, framing front yards now choked by a dense canopy of broadleaf vines. This quiet collision of Midwestern suburban planning and deep Amazonian overgrowth creates a profoundly unsettling calm. There is no violent destruction here. The original concrete sidewalks are still arranged in rigid geometric grids beneath the jungle floor. Number 1. Fordlandia. A colossal industrial grid lies dead on the muddy banks of an Amazon tributary. Concrete factory floors and oxidized steel beams are systematically swallowed by the advancing canopy. Thick vines weave through shattered window frames, pulling the architecture into the wet soil. The sheer scale of the ruins amplifies the absence of the workers who built it. A rusted water tower casts its shadow over an intersection of empty, root-buckled streets. A cracked concrete swimming pool sits quietly beneath the consuming jungle canopy. The world's wealthiest industrialist shipped a complete Michigan town to this riverbank, importing cinemas, paved roads, and mandatory square dances. The rubber trees died first. Planted unnaturally close, the fragile clones became a perfect host for South American leaf blight. As contemporary agricultural records documented, fungal spores consumed millions of saplings, leaving endless rows of brittle sticks. Yet biology was only one lever of the collapse. Pushed to the breaking point by mandatory time clocks and strict dietary laws, laborers rioted, shattering the imported machinery. Now, creeping vines pull those rusted gears into the soil. High above the unbroken Amazon canopy, the unmistakable silhouette of a Midwestern water tower pierces the sky. Of everything on this list, this single image is the one I keep coming back to. The towering steel tank is heavily corroded, its support legs entirely swallowed by thick vines and relentless creeping roots. Built to sustain an industrial utopia, the 50-meter structure now holds only a shallow pool of stagnant rainwater and oxidized flakes of iron.